Something witty. Something witty. I got nothing witty. Well, that was a movie. Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on the Netflix original Look Both Ways. It's starring Lily Reinhardt and was directed by Wanuri Kahui, I think. I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name. I'm sorry if I butchered it. But yeah, in case you don't know what it is, like I said, it's a Netflix original. It follows Lily Reinhardt's character as she, the night before she's supposed to graduate, takes a pregnancy test because she's been feeling sick. In that moment, the story splits into two different directions. On one hand, the pregnancy tests are positive, and she decides to keep the baby, and that affects her for the rest of her life for obvious reasons. On the other hand, the tests come back negative, and she continues on with her life as she was planning it to be. Both stories take place, and they cut back and forth between these two alternate realities, showing what would be different, what her lives would be like in both of these scenarios. To me, such a crazy good idea. Such an interesting concept that I had to give it a watch, even though it was presented to me as being kind of like a Hallmark-esque style movie, but with a little bit more substance than that. So, in case you hadn't heard about this movie, I hadn't either until like a week ago, because this movie did come out about a month ago on Netflix, but I was completely unaware of it. But a friend actually told me to watch it, and like I said, I was hesitant at first. This movie's got a 6.3 on IMDb and like a 49% on Metacritic, so I'm like, I don't know, you're telling me it's this Hallmark-style movie, it's gonna be kind of cheesy, I can tell it's low budget just by looking at the trailer, and it's got pretty bad reviews across the board from critics, so maybe it won't be for me, but that concept does sound interesting, it sounds original. I know with a bunch of different movies, people are obsessed with the idea of alternate realities. How different would my life be if fill in the blank? I mean, right now we've got like the Doctor Strange movies and Everything Everywhere All at Once, where we're dealing with these parallel universes, of multiverse, if you will. And those are really interesting concepts, but they're always completely different. One day a leaf falls in a certain way and it affects something on the opposite side of the world, you know, the butterfly effect, and everything changes forever. All of a sudden, instead of being, you know, a movie critic like I am now, I'm an opera singer because of one little thing that changed everything. This takes a very different approach in that everything can still be, despite being completely different, surprisingly similar, surprisingly the same. And I love that about this movie, because it really did treat both storylines with respect. Because so in the one storyline, there's a will they, won't they with the dad of the kid. And in the other storyline, she pursues her career, and then there's another possible love interest there in a whole different part of life. And it doesn't treat one like it's more important than the other. I thought for the longest time, well, I'm going to like this love interest more, and I'm going to be rooting for this storyline. And I kind of felt like I was at times, but honestly, both were good. Both were good options, and I love that, because I think so often we think of like, oh, what if life had turned out differently? What if, you know, this had gone a little bit differently and my life would have been better? And this does a great job of showing that despite both lives being imperfect, there's good in both. And maybe you'll watch this movie and say, man, that one life was better than the other. But I don't think that's the point of the movie. I think the point of the movie is to show that no matter what happens, life will be okay. Life will keep going. It may not be perfect, but life is never going to be perfect no matter what. So there's good in both. There's bad in both, but there is good in both. And so I really did love that about this movie. Now, backing up, this movie, yes, it feels very much like a Hallmark movie. Not quite that bad. Maybe a good Hallmark movie, but it's definitely very cheap feeling. The camera work is nothing to write home about. It's very basic. It's very like point and shoot. There's no artistic integrity in the camera work, no artistic design in that. Speaking of artistic design, this character is supposedly an artist. She wants to be an animator or an illustrator, and both different stories she ends up going to different avenues with her art, but she wants to be an artist. And in a lot of these movies, whenever somebody's an artist, whenever you're trying to portray somebody as that, it never feels genuine, it feels fake. It's like whenever you see like a stand-up comedian in a movie, or, you know, just a comedian in general, like when they show like a funny scene from a movie and everybody's laughing hysterically at it, and you're just like, that wasn't funny. I felt the same way about like a lot of the art and how it's portrayed in this movie. I'm like, that it's not very good. It's like, I don't buy it. And I, for the most part, didn't buy her as she was talking about the art. There was a couple of scenes, though, that did make me buy in a little bit. I have to say, Lily Reinhardt did a lot of heavy lifting with this character, because a lot of the dialogue was really, really, really bad. So much so that even when there were more big-name actors in this movie, Luke Wilson actually plays her dad, he was awful because he couldn't get past the dialogue. I also feel like some actors were acting as if this movie was a comedy, and other actors were acting as if this movie was a drama, so it was kind of uneven because of that. But most of it, I feel like, came down to the dialogue. But what Lily Reinhardt was able to do was take some mediocre dialogue and a poorly written character and make it into her own, and bring it to life, and make her interesting. And that is why I enjoyed this movie. Like I said, there's so many things. I didn't even get to all the things I could complain about this movie. Like the CGI being god-awful. There were supposed to be fireworks going off. They looked like somebody downloaded like a free version of some sort of effects program on a computer in a library and did it in half an hour before their timer ran out and they got kicked off. Like, it looked bad. It looked really bad. And then also throughout, one of the love interests plays in a band, and they show the band play a couple times, and like the dubbing, the lip syncing is so god awful. It's really, really bad. So this movie, it feels cheap. It is cheap. It's not high quality, but what makes this movie good is that storyline, because I'm a sucker for that storyline, but also the earnestness with which it is told. Like the genuineness. I loved, like I said, Lily Reinhardt was so good in this. There's a couple other actors too. Danny Ramirez was really good in it. I wasn't a huge fan of him when the movie started, but as it went, I saw his character develop. I saw him develop throughout, and he became better and better as the movie went along, and I loved him. In fact, he actually started reminding me of Steven Yeun a little bit in his acting style, which is a compliment, because Steven Yeun is a great, fantastic actor, and he was starting to remind me of him a little bit. So I thought he was really good by the end of it. David Cornsweet, however you say his name, I thought I would hate him when he first came on screen, because he was like a Hemsworth wannabe. Like, he was trying to be Chris or maybe Liam Hemsworth, and I'm like, oh god, here's this typical annoying love interest. I'm out. I'm tapped out. I don't care about this storyline. And then he brought a level of genuineness to it as well, that I cared about the character. I cared about all the characters. I don't know how, because like the writing wasn't really that good, but I ended up caring about all of them. And like I said, I really thought I was gonna like pick the one storyline and be like, yep, I'm rooting for this one. And I mean, in some ways I did prefer the one over the other, but not really. Like, it was able to make me get invested in both, which is really hard to do, because it's like you're seeing this character, the main character, who was the best actor in the movie, by the way. She was great. And so you're invested in her because she's so well portrayed, and so you care about her. You care about her character, where she goes, and so you would think that you'd be like, oh, don't go with him, be with him. And you're watching her simultaneously fall in love with, and out of love, with two different characters, and you'd think you would be invested enough to then be like, no, not that guy, this guy. But both were so good in their own way that you were rooting for her, even within the relationships and outside, because her life isn't just the relationships. It's also her job. It's also her kid in the one storyline. There's more going on, that you just wanted whatever was best for her. And that's, I mean, like I said, I don't know how much of it's the writing, because normally I would say that's good writing. Maybe it was good writing plot-wise, but just not good writing dialogue-wise. Whatever the case is, I was invested and I enjoyed it, despite its imperfections. I'm not trying to say, yeah, this is an Oscar movie. This is going to win an Academy Award for any reason. It's not. It's a Netflix original, and it feels like one. But I enjoyed it because of the characters, because of how the story is so unique, despite being every, chick flick cliche anyway. Like, you still go through the ups and downs of every chick flick. You still have to go through all of that drama, but in the end, it felt original. It felt fresh. I was invested the whole time. I never got bored, which, by the way, it's almost 2 hours long. Chick flicks aren't usually that long, especially just ones about like will they, won't they type stuff. Like, you could pump this out. I was like, yeah, why are we dedicating a full hour to both? We could have dedicated 40 minutes to each and we would have been fine. No, I felt like the 2 hours was warranted. I enjoyed it. I never really got bored. I I actually enjoyed it, which is crazy because I really didn't think that I would enjoy it. Like I said, I'm not saying it's a great movie. If I'm giving an objective rating as a critic for it, I would give it like a 6 or a 6.5. But that's saying a lot because you have to keep in mind, like, the imperfections. Like I said, the special effects, the dubbing, the camera work, all of it. It's like, it's cheap. It looked like it was filmed on a potato. I cared about this story, despite all of that. So, I cared enough about it to get into spoilers. I'm going to get into spoilers, but I just wanted to say, yeah, despite everything, I actually really did enjoy it. It's one of those movies that, like, people would say, oh, it's a guilty pleasure. I don't really believe in guilty pleasures, though, because, like, if I like something, I have a reason to like it. And so I can see that it's flawed. I can see that there's some poor execution in some areas. I can see that there's obvious limitations, but I did enjoy it because it was a genuinely good story told by genuinely good actors. So I enjoyed it. So, yeah, that's what I had to think. I'm going to get into spoilers now, but I do recommend it. It is on Netflix, so if you already have the account, you don't have to pay anything for it, except 2 hours of your time. So, yeah, it's silly, it's cheesy. Some of the acting, like Luke Wilson, it's hard to get over, but he was also genuinely funny at times, too. It's a bit off-kilter, but it is enjoyable, especially if you heard that story idea and said, man, that sounds interesting, I want to check it out. I definitely recommend it, but I am going to get into spoilers now, so please, if you don't want anything spoiled, click away, but please remember to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. So, spoilers. Alright, so how I had it described to me was she's given these 2 pregnancy tests. One is positive, one is negative. That's not exactly what happens, actually. She's given these pregnancy tests. They give her 3, actually. Her friend goes out and gets her 3. They show 3 boxes. I even rewound and double-checked this to make sure I wasn't going to rant about this for no reason. And so she ends up taking 2 of them, and right then it shows her take 2, and 2 are negative, and then it doubles back and shows her take 2, and both are positive. And that really just pissed me off, because that's so much wasted potential right there. And I'm like, what they should have done is she should have taken 2, and then 1 is positive, 1 is negative. And you're like, well, which one's the false one? Oh, we've got a 3rd one. We can check it. And then you can show at the end that which one it is, or you don't even have to show. Frankly, I prefer you didn't show, but you show that she takes it, and you can show, like, you can be like, do an Inception thing, you know, where, like, she's taking the 3rd test, you've got the timer clicking down, she holds it up, and she goes, and then you cut to black, written, directed by fill in the blank, and oh! And I thought for a second, because at the end of the movie, she revisits the bathroom that she took the test in, and I'm like, oh, okay, so we didn't miss out on that. We are going to, no, they don't. They never, like, but she had 3 tests. We should have had a false positive or negative, and a correct positive or negative, and then the 3rd one would have been, so, yeah, I know that's nitpicking, but it's like, you were so close to something really great, and you whiffed on that. And I feel like a lot of this movie is that. This movie ended up just being very okay, like, and good at times, but this movie with that concept could have been great. This, obviously, it is a chick flick. It's a cheap Netflix original chick flick, so you can't really have high standards or high expectations for it. But that is such an interesting idea that I wish somebody better made it. Because the directing, you know, the camera work, all that is nothing special. It was just a really good idea. So I have some issue with that, and I wish that it could have been elevated, but that's a nitpick. It's nothing they did wrong. It's just something right that they could have did, and they didn't, which is, you know, unfortunate. But like I was saying, with her whole job thing, you know, so in the one life where she has the kid, she ends up becoming a webcomic illustrator, and then they put her on, like, top 10 comics to watch or whatever, and then she's asked to be on, like, a board at some sort of festival to talk about, and she's put on a board with, like, the other reality version of hers boss, who's, like, this world famous animator person, apparently. She's just a webcomic, like, I know Homestuck was, like, a really big webcomic. I never read it, but I've heard about it. That's how big it is. It's a really big webcomic. I don't think they were asking the Homestuck guy to talk, you know, on a board with, like, freaking, I don't know, the modern equivalent of Walt Disney, whoever that would be. Like, no, people don't give a shit about webcomics like that. So it was just hard to buy into that. And then in the other version, she becomes an animator, and she submits a short animated film to a festival, and it gets accepted. And it's like, okay, that's believable. until they show the short film, at least a clip of it, and you're like, God, this is pretty awful. But everybody's cheering like it's amazing, and then she gets offered a new job and all that. And it's like, that stuff is hard to buy into because it's just really poorly done. But, that's just movie stuff. Like I said, though, there is a conversation here or there that did make me believe she was an artist. My favorite conversation is she's talking to her love interest in the non-baby storyline, and he is really into movies as well, but more from like a production standpoint. He wants to be like a documentary producer. And so he's like, oh, I've always said I wish that we could make a live action adaptation of Spirited Away. And she's like, how dare you? And he's like, what? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with, making a live action remake? And she's like, why would you ever do that? Because animation is so beautiful, and you can never make like an actual movie, like a live action movie adaptation of an animated movie and be nearly as good. It's always way worse. And I was like, okay, I buy you now as an animator because of the way you're talking about it. And then he comes back with, oh, there have been plenty of remakes. And she's like, name one. And he says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990 one. And I was like, see, now I kind of like him too. He may have a horrible opinion, but at least he's got an opinion and he's sticking to it. I like that. And so he was the one I didn't think I'd like because he's this Liam Hemsworth type, Chris Hemsworth type, and he's just lame at first, and you think, and then the more you get to know him, the more you see his personality, the more I was like, okay, I actually really like this guy. So yeah, they did a good job of making me care about all of these characters, which is surprising because I really didn't think I would. Just based on how he looked, I'm sorry, I know it was stereotyping, but I was like, oh, this lame. He's the type that you'd see on the front of like a romance novel, like, ugh, I don't care. But no, he was actually an interesting character with a personality. Granted, they do skim over a lot of stuff, even on her side with like the work and personality and relationship stuff. Like a lot of it ended up being like tell instead of show. Like at one point when she breaks up with him because they're doing long distance, and she's like, it's not working, you're not putting in any effort. And he's like, I am putting in effort, it's just hard. That's the only time we see anything about that. So it's like, well, is she overreacting and just saying that? Or is she telling the truth? Because you're telling us from her perspective, we don't know. If you had shown us, then we would know, but you're just telling us, and so we don't know if we're supposed to believe you or not. I assume we are, but like that's the problem with telling and not showing. I want to be shown things, I just don't want to be told what I'm supposed to think about a situation. So this movie had some, bad writing across the board. But like I said, what it comes down to is that plot being a really interesting idea. Like I said, having a multiverse concept, I know it's not multiverse, it's just a what if, but like having that kind of concept and it not be depressing and instead being uplifting on, hey, look, things can go dramatically wrong, so to speak, in either version of life, and still good can come out of it. Because even in the perfect planned life, she loses her job, she breaks up, and she has to then get her job back and start the relationship up again. And then the other one, she ends up still being happy as well. And that's great! That's awesome, because that's never talked about. We always just say like, oh, well, man, I just wish I ended up in the timeline where we were happy together. Like in Doctor Strange, I love Doctor Strange, and I love the sadness. I'm a sucker for sad movies too, and when he's talking about how he wishes he could be with her in the universe where they were both in love with each other, talk about it in Everything Everywhere All at Once as well. I love that concept, but hey, having a positive outlook on life is a good thing too. I know I never have one, but this movie made me emotional, okay? Like, I know it's a Hallmark cheesy piece of crap, but like it did work, I read a review because I recently watched 7 Pounds, which a lot of critics hated that movie, and I read Roger Ebert's review on it, and he said, look, I know this movie is cheese, I know I'm being pandered to, I know I'm being emotionally manipulated, but I like being emotionally manipulated if it's done well. And that's how I felt with 7 Pounds, because that movie isn't a great movie either, but I really did enjoy it because the emotional manipulation that it does, I let myself because I enjoyed what it was telling me. And same thing with this. Now, this isn't as good as 7 Pounds either, by the way. Nobody in this movie can act as well as Will Smith. But, like, that's the point I'm trying to make is, like, I was aware I was being manipulated here emotionally. But I let myself because I was invested. And so, yeah, no, it's not a great movie, but it's good enough, to me at least, that I allowed the cheese, I allowed the manipulation to take me and say, like, hey, look, life isn't perfect, but it's still good. It's not perfect, no matter what. no matter if you end up with the dream person or not, it's still good. It still is. It can still be good. Even if you've got the best plan that you could ever dream of and you think that it's going to be perfect and then it falls apart and you're left without anything, there's still good in there. There can be. You just have to let it happen. And I do mean that because, honestly, this bitch self-sabotaged a lot and self-pitied a lot, and that, you know, in the typical chick flick fashion where you're like 3/4 of the way through the movie and everything has to go wrong. I really started to hate this bitch for a second because she just was self-sabotaging and feeling sorry for herself. But, like, hey, we all do that. I do that. And so I really appreciated how, you know, this movie was trying to have a hopeful message when it's like, At one point, I actually even wondered if in one of the stories she wasn't going to end up with anybody and they would say that's okay, because that's a valuable lesson too. You don't have to end up with somebody to be happy. You could just do your career, or you could just have your kid and whatever. And they didn't do that, but they could have. And so, once again, I enjoyed that they allowed things to go wrong and still be considered a good life. I really appreciated that. And it was really interesting too, because in the version that she gets pregnant, she doesn't move to LA, which is where she meets her other love interest. But her friend, her best friend, still does move to LA, and she goes and visits her for a day, and she bumps into her love interest from the other timeline and immediately has a little bit of a connection there, a little crush, but it never develops past that. And that really gets you thinking too, because you're like, I wonder how many people in my life I could have fallen in love with or gotten married to if life turned out differently. But at the same time, like I'm saying, it does ask those questions of the what if this, what if that, but it never makes you feel bad about it because the alternative is still good. Now, I get that life isn't good for everybody. Not everybody has a happy life. And I'm sorry if that's the case for you. But, like, it's saying just because this one thing didn't happen doesn't mean something else good can't. And I love that. I really do. As a registered cynic, a pessimist, if you will, who normally hates that kind of cheese, this movie made me like it. It really did. So, I don't know what that means, because it wasn't a great movie, like I said. But it was good, and I was invested, and, you know, like I said, it made me emotional, it made me cry a little bit, it made me laugh a little bit. It was a fun time. Don't know that I'd watch it again, but it's one of those ideas, now that it's an infectious idea, that it's going to be stuck in my head. I'm going to be thinking about this idea for a long time. The idea, after all, is better than the actual movie. But still, this idea is going to be rolling around my head, and it's going to be, frankly, a part of my personality from now on. And that's the best movies do that, where it infects you with this idea that's so powerful that it then affects how you think about life. And this movie did, because now, anytime a well-laid plan goes to waste, I'm not going to sit around wondering what if as much. I hope not, because now I'll just say, okay, well, that's not the storyline I'm in. And maybe alternate reality Simon is enjoying that plan, but this version of Simon is enjoying whatever else is going to happen. And so I'm glad that I saw this movie. I really am. I don't know why I like it, but I do. So, yeah, I do wholeheartedly recommend it, with the caveat that it's not a great movie. So if you're going to be a stingy little movie critic about it, okay, sure, you won't like it. But here's proof that somebody who is cynical, that somebody is, very critical of movies, can enjoy it. So I did. I genuinely did. And I'm not ashamed. This is not a guilty pleasure. It was just a pleasure to watch. So that's what I had to think. What did you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments below. And, of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys.